Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the very first hybrid meeting of Perth and Kinross Council Audit Committee, which is being live streamed to the public and press who may be watching. We have tested systems and they seem to be working okay, so fingers crossed everything should go swimmingly today. Can I first of all start by asking Kirsten if there are any apologies and to take a roll call, please. Thank you.
Yes, Convener, we have an apology from Councillor Harricote. Morning, members. We have the Convener, Councillor Drysdale and Councillor Donaldson in the chambers this morning. And members at home, when I call out your name, can you please confirm you're present? Councillor Liz Barrett.
Present.
Councillor Illingworth.
Present.
Councillor McCall.
Present.
And Councillor McDade.
Present.
Thank you. All members are present, Convener.
Thank you, everyone. And can I ask if there are any declarations of interest in respect of the items of business today? If so, please put DI in the chat. We'll allow a few seconds for that. Does not appear to be any declarations of interest. Thank you for that. Now, just before we move on to the next item of business, I just wanted to ensure that members were content that item P1, internal audit follow-up, is taken in private session at the end of this meeting. This due to cash security issues and to ensure that the safety of cash handling is not compromised by any public disclosures of any details. So I propose, unless there are any strong objections, to hold the relevant item in private session at the end of this meeting. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Okay, and again, before moving on, can I just briefly remember, I know members are all experienced now, but we are now in a pre-election period, and please bear that in mind. Item 3 in the agenda is the minute of the meeting of the Audit Committee of 7th February 2022. Are there any comments on the draft minute? There doesn't appear to be. Can I take these minutes as approved?
Approved.
Approved. Agreed.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, now we move on to the first substantive item on the agenda, which is a briefing note on the Roads Maintenance Partnership Agreement. And if I can ask Stuart Dahl to speak to that report, please. Thank you, Stuart.
Thank you, Convener. Yes, this is an old audit action dating back to 2017. We were asked to consider looking at a quality assurance system for the design process that we do for the road maintenance partnership works, and we looked into that. In terms of our design work we do, it's not hugely complex, but there is a fair bit of consultation, a fair bit of discussion, and a lot of steps in the process to achieve it. So rather than go down a formal BSI accredited type quality system for the type of work we do, we elected to put in place a checklist for every project that we do under a framework contract. We put that checklist in place quite early, and we've reviewed it every year since to ensure the checklist is fit for purpose. It ensures that we're carrying out appropriate checks and balances in terms of preparing the works, the pricing schedule, and offering the works to contractors and getting their written agreement to undertake the work for the value that we've offered it to them. So it closes off these loops to make sure that we've got good governance in terms of our offer of work and their acceptance of work. and we did that via a letter that we issued to all contractors as well. So that was the system we introduced. We don't require to have any formal auditing process in place. However, in the management team within the RMP, we do an annual random sample of designers' projects to ensure that they're following the checklist, they're getting the elements that need signed off by a more senior colleague, and that everything's getting carried out appropriately in terms of the offer of work to the people on the framework contract. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your report. If I can ask you, if you have any questions, please to put Q in the chat. And I see that Councillor Donaldson has so done. So over to you, Stuart.
Thank you, Convener. First of all, thank you, Stuart Dahl, for your comments. It was myself who raised this at the last audit committee back in early February and was asked for an update. And one of my main reasons was it had been noted as an item of medium risk, but in particular it was because it dated back originally to March 2017, and that's 5 years ago. So what I want to ask Stuart and also Jackie, our internal auditor, do you feel that this whole matter is now being resolved after really what is a long period of time, and perhaps we could have resolved this much sooner? Thank you.
Yeah, I could come back in, Councillor Donaldson. Yes, we did put in place the checklist and the offer of works letter at quite an early stage following audit, and we could have brought it back to committee to close it off at an earlier stage than we have done. It's worked well since we put it in place, and I think we've resolved any potential issues we had in the award of work by following this process for all the works of offer under the framework. So I think it's resolved the issue that was deemed to be there.
Jackie?
Thank you, Convener. Yes, the paper certainly provides evidence that that these risks are now being managed appropriately. So I don't see any reason why this would not pose the action.
Okay, and a follow-up for Councillor Donaldson.
It's really just to say thanks, and at last, because it has been 5 years since it arose, so at least this is now completed. We know where we stand on this issue, so thanks.
Okay, are there any further questions? Would appear to be.
I've got a question.
All right.
A quick question, Stuart. You mentioned that you do random checks. How many random checks do you do in a year, just to make sure the checklists are followed through?
We put roughly 70 projects out on the framework contract a year, and we'll check probably 10% of that, or 10 between 7 and 10 of these projects across different designers, just to make sure that they're following it well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. If there are no further questions, can we note this report?
Noted.
Thank you.
Noted.
Okay, so now we move on to item 5 on the agenda, which is Perth and Kinross Council Audit Strategy for the year ending 31st March 2022. And we're joined this morning, and welcome to Carol Batchelor of KPMG, who will be able to speak to this report and hopefully answer any questions that members may have. Carol, do you wish to introduce this report, please?
Yes, thank you very much. So I will go through at a high level our audit strategy for the 22 financial year. I'm going to move straight through to page 7 of the report that refers to materiality. So our materiality is based on total expenditure that was audited in the prior year. So for the group accounts, that is set at 10.2 million, and for the council itself, that's set at 10 million. And our reporting threshold for misstatements, individual and in aggregate, is set at 250,000. I'm then going to move on to page 9 onwards. This focuses on our significant risks as well as our other audit areas of focus. And these are the areas that that drive our audit focus. There are 2 that are driven by the auditing standards, ISO 240, which is the fraud risk over income recognition and expenditure. And there's also fraud risk over management, the risk of management override of controls. Another significant risk is the valuation of property and investment property, and also retirement benefits. I'm just going to briefly just speak to these individually. So from a risk of management override of controls, we do, sorry, I'm on page 10. We do focus on understanding management oversight and whether there has been a risk of override of controls. We do extensive journal entry testing, and we do unpredictable or procedures that haven't been done in the past, so that we're keeping that level of challenge and professional skepticism. If I move on to page 11, there's also a ISO 240 has a designated fraud risk over income recognition, and expenditure as well. And we focus on that. So in terms of our audit approach, we focus on auditing the different revenue streams and understanding the risks there. And expenditure, although we don't believe all expenditure has the same level of fraud risk. We spent quite a bit of time testing cutoff of expenditure and the non-routine expenditure that occurs. If I move on to page 12, another significant risk is the valuation of property and investment property. So the values here are extremely significant. So here we use specialists, valuation specialists, to assist us in the auditing of these areas. It is very specialized, and we've actually already started engaging with them. So the council uses valuation dates of 1 April 2021 and 1 August, and we use those and we audit that. But we also look at those, the bucket of items and the properties that are not valued in the past financial year, and we also do separate and specific audit procedures over that category as well. We have to gain comfort that there's no material misstatement in those items of properties. Our last significant risk on page 14 is with respect to the retirement benefit obligation. The values here are big, and the assumptions, it's critical that the assumptions are within the benchmark and ranges that are acceptable. So we involve actuarial specialists in the audit of this work. A small change in certain assumptions will have a significant impact on the net pension liability. So those are our significant risks. However, we also have specific other audit areas that we focus on. So on page 15, we outline this in a bit of detail. We focus on capital expenditure. There is a number of very big projects that the council has committed to, but is also currently engaged in. So we do specific audit testing over that for the period as well as understanding the capital commitments that are in place and what needs to be disclosed in the financial statements. On page 16, another area of audit focus is also COVID-19 related grants, as well as other grants. So the council does receive grants, so we do specific audit procedures over these to understand that they've been recognized correctly, they clearly disclosed in the financial statements, and that they've been used for the purpose for which they were given. So those are really our audit focus areas. I just want to make a point that throughout our audit process, we follow a risk-based audit. So if something does come to our attention that changes that line, we will update our processes and adapt our audit approach accordingly, and that will be reported at our I just want to also just confirm 28, which is within the appendix, just confirms our independence as the auditors.
Sorry, you're breaking up there, Carol. I think we just lost you. It was your screen has frozen. Can you hear us again? Hello, yeah, just for the last 10, 15 seconds or so, we lost you there. If you wouldn't mind just repeating your last sentence or two.
Yes, okay. Sorry about that. On page 28, it's just confirming our independence as the auditors to the council. And page 29, I'm just highlighting our audit timeline and our plan. In the past, there was an extension in terms of the audited financials being finalised by end of October, but we're now bringing that back to the end of September, which is in line with the timing pre-COVID.
Okay. Thank you for that. That concludes your report. Thank you. Now, if there are any questions, I'm sure there will be for Carol, please can members put a Q in the chat. Or maybe there won't be. Right, Councillor Donaldson. Thank you.
Thank you, convener, and thank you, Carl. What I'd like to focus specifically on is what you stated about other audit areas, and in particular on the council's capital expenditure programme. And basically, I wanted to ask, first of all, that are you going to look at this in terms of the context of the council's 30-year investment blueprint and the processes and controls that will apply there? And I think in particular because it's we are probably as a council one of the earlier ones to go down this route. But within what you're going to do, secondly, is you're going to look at a number of big projects. Would you be able to perhaps identify some of them apart, along with, I think you mentioned PH2O, but any others in particular that you'd be looking at? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. So yes, we will be looking at that 30-year project that you have referred to. In terms of our focus areas, we will be looking at those individually significant projects from a value point of view. So we've just mentioned the few there that you've also alluded to, but we will be focusing on those that are significant in value.
And just a follow-up from Councillor Donaldson.
Yeah, just I think there are a number of large projects. We need to look at processes and controls. I will identify one, and we're going to be having a meeting of ward councillors with the new project manager, Gavin Bissett, this Friday, and that's good news that we seem to have the position together again. But that is the Comrie Flood Protection Scheme. It's a major project of the order of 28 million, and there have been delays, and it has been disappointing. There has been slippage, and it's really to look, if possible, at that. But there may well be other projects in a similar position. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. And now we have a question from Councillor Liz Barrett. Liz.
Thank you, convener. I'd like to ask in the context of the financial sustainability, if you could advise what particular challenges you see in looking at that going forward, given the present economic situation.
Thank you for the question. It certainly is challenging times when we start looking at future sustainability. So what we will always look at here is the 5-year forecasts and the plans that are in place going forward, the capital commitments that are in place, as well as the funding of that. So we will be looking at budgets, forecasts, cash flow projections. But as you've quite correctly mentioned, what was perhaps done 6 months ago and what needs to be relooked at now could be quite different, just with the risk of inflation, food, fuel costs. So we will be taking that current information into account. We also do involve our own specialists in this regard as well, so that we're having that correct level of professional skepticism and challenge, as well as their insights as to what is happening and what can be expected to happen economically going forward. So from our audit point of view, we do rely also on other specialists.
And just as a follow-up to that, I know the audit fee is covered in the report. That's a fixed fee, is it?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further questions for Carol?
Oh, I have a question, please. My cues don't seem to be coming up in the chat for you, but not to worry. The council recently introduced a new process for assessing capital projects in terms of setting up a roadmap, if you like, through large projects in terms of setting up them. Business plans and outline business plans. Will that be part of the audit?
Yes, I believe it will be, because we'll be looking at that entire process.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much. If there are no further questions, can I thank Carol very much for her attendance this morning. You're welcome to stay if you so wish, obviously, but you're also welcome to go if you've other commitments. Thank you for your contributions this morning, and I just wanted to at the end of this is the final year of KPMG's involvement with Perth and Kinross Council, and I just wanted to place on record this committee's thanks for your organisation's services over these 5 years, and for the scrutiny that you have applied to the operations of Perth and Kinross Council. It's been and continues to be a very strong relationship, and very much appreciated at this end. So thanks very much.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Okay. Moving on, therefore, we move to item 6 on the agenda, which is the internal audit update. We will be returning to private papers later on, but in terms of the general internal audit update, I can ask Jackie Clark, our Chief Internal Auditor, to comment on that report, please.
Thank you, convener. The update report provides a snapshot of internal audit activity to date. As you can see, we've continued working on the internal audit plan. We've concluded the work in connection with the National Fraud Initiative, which is subject to a separate report on this agenda. We've undertaken the extended follow-up for 2 reports which have previously been considered by the Audit Committee. Again, that appears later on the agenda for this meeting. We've also continued to provide internal audit services for the Integration Joint Board, and worked on some additional areas which of unplanned work since the last committee. Like many teams, COVID has impacted on our ability to finalise some areas of work. We do have reports out in draft, in addition to what's reported on the appendix. But unfortunately, we weren't able to finalise those in time for this committee. Recruitment is ongoing for expanding the team with interviews taking place next week. If anybody has any questions about our current status, then please do feel free to ask now.
Bear with me. Something had to go wrong at some point, so bear with me. If there are any questions to Jackie in respect of this report, please can you type Q in the chat, or Councillor Illingworth, if you don't have access to the chat, if you can come on screen and we can take your question. Don't appear to be any questions to Jackie. Oh, there is. I beg your pardon, Councillor Donaldson.
If no one else is going to ask, could I just ask Jackie? It has been asked before, but we know the constraints have been placed upon you and your team throughout the pandemic because so many people were allocated to other areas. But this is more just for the future audit committee, and it may well be members of that committee may well look at this meeting. Your actual staff complement is 4 point, I think it's 5. I'm not quite sure on the figure, but can I ask how you're placed at the moment, and how many you're recruiting for, 1 or is it 2 people?
Thank you for the question, Councillor. We do have an establishment of 4.5 full-time equivalents. We currently have 3 full-time people in post in internal audit, one of whom is our audit trainee. I'm recruiting currently for a senior internal auditor, and thereafter looking to augment with another member of staff once the senior auditor is in place.
So provided that your new senior internal auditor can be in place, there is a reasonable prospect that the reports on violence and aggression, child protection, and also IT assets, agency workers and cities deals may be completed by June, the next meeting of audit.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Liz Barrett, you have a comment.
Yeah, following on from Stuart's question about resources, I just wanted to thank Jackie and her very small team for what they have managed to achieve in over the last year with the resources they have available. It's very much appreciated. I look forward to you being able to do even more when there are even more of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll pass that on to the team.
Okay, that's great. There are no further questions or comments in the chat. So can we agree to note Jackie's report?
Noted.
Noted.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, now we move on to the final item in the public session, which is item 7. The National Fraud Initiative 2020-2021 outcomes. And again, I can ask Jackie Clark to speak to this report. Jackie, thanks.
Thank you, Convener. As the committee is aware, the National Fraud Initiative is a national exercise which is undertaken every 2 years and matches information held within the public sector with the aim of detecting fraud and error. Internal audit has supported services throughout the process to undertake a risk-based approach to investigating matches that have been identified. Section 2 of this report highlights the outcomes for Perth and Kinross. From the total of 85 reports, which is 85 separate matches, separate areas of matches, then we had a total of almost 12,500 matches, of which 70% were investigated by services. The outcomes, as you can see in section 2.2, are a total of just over £25,000 worth of fraud and error that was identified. The primary area of these outcomes relate to the COVID-related business grants, which are new to the NFI process, with the benefit outcomes being £869, which is a very low figure. What the NFI does provide for us is assurance that our systems and controls in stopping fraud getting into the system are effective. So there is a lot of work that is undertaken, but what it does provide us with is that degree of assurance that our systems are effective in blocking out fraud at source, and that's one of the main things that we'll take from this. The committee is also aware that we don't undertake any matches in relation to the single person discount, along with the electoral register. As the committee knows, this is a legal judgment, that our legal opinion is that we're not permitted to share the electoral register for that purpose. However, our revenues and benefits colleagues undertake a separate exercise, which is currently ongoing, to match our records for single person discount against a wider range of available sources, such as through credit card references, mobile phone records, which gives us a broader and more comprehensive view of the accuracy of our records for single person discount. When the outcomes from that is available, as in the past, I will provide the outcomes to this the audit committee. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Thank you, Jackie. And again, I can invite members if they have any questions to put Q in the chat or come on screen, as Councillor Illingworth has done. So we'll go with yourself first, David. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, convener. The figures. Two questions actually. First of all, the figures that you identify as possible error or fraud seem to be on the low side. Is how much is that as a percentage of the total incomes distributed?
It is tiny, but I will get the exact proportions and I'll circulate that information around.
You say it's,
but it is very, very small indeed.
Less than 0.1%.
I couldn't say for definite, but my hunch would be that.
Right. Okay, that's fine for me. Thank you. And the second question is, you talk about a risk-based approach to selecting which matches to refer. Are you able to discuss that in any more detail?
Yes, Councillor. Various different matches come with various different fields that they're matching against. But when we're referring to matches, for example, blue badges, which is quite a sensitive match,
yeah,
then we include, to make sure that we're looking at the right people, that there's a national insurance number which is very unique to an individual, and that is matched against other records. And when those two, when two national insurance numbers match, then we assume that is high quality match for that match. If it's simply based on an address, then that is it's a lower quality, and therefore we would definitely investigate all those which are national insurance, so a high quality match. But those where the lowers, we would take a proportion. So look at percentage and see what the outcome was looking like, and then consider whether any further investigations were due. I hope that kind of helps you to understand what we mean by the risk-based approach.
Yep, that's very helpful. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your question, and thank you for the answer, Jackie. And Councillor Liz Barrett. Liz.
Thank you, Convener. Jackie, my first question was largely covered by David. I mean, £25,000 looks like a lot of money, but in the context of the huge amounts of grants which the Finance Department, with support across the Council, managed to process and put out in a short space of time, it doesn't look like very much. But as a follow-up to that, I just wondered if we know what proportion of that we expect to recover.
It's difficult to say at this point what proportion we would anticipate recovering. At this point, where we are taking action to recover all of it, what we will end up with, that's difficult to actually ascertain at this point. Some areas are with Police Scotland to continue because they cover more than one authority. So again, that gives us a degree of uncertainty. But it is a very small amount and for the thousands of payments that have been made under those schemes. The arrangements that were put in place from the beginning with checks being done by independent revenues and benefits colleagues as well really boosted the control environment, and that's come through with the low level of fraud and error in this area.
Yeah, I agree. I think that is a really good outcome. Thanks to everybody involved in that.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further questions? If not, the committee is asked to note this report, which outlines the action taken by Perth and Kinross Council in response to the requirements of the National Fraud Initiative and the outcomes for the 2020-21 exercise. The committee is also asked to note the actions taken by the Revenues and Benefits Service as a result of the non-provision of electoral register information. So can we agree to note the report?
Noted.
Noted.
Thank you very much. Okay, that draws us to the end of the public meeting this morning. And in closing, a couple of comments from myself. Firstly, I would, this is the last audit committee of this council, and I just wanted to pass on my personal thanks and the thanks on behalf of the whole committee, I'm sure, to Jackie Clark for her sterling service throughout what has been an extraordinary period with pressures on the audit team that are probably unique. Jackie, you've done a fantastic job throughout, and I really wanted to thank you for that, and please pass on these thanks to your colleagues in past and present in your team, and also thank you to Lisa Simpson for her legal input and her wise counsel throughout these 5 years.
Thank you, Convener. I will pass that on to the team.
Thank you. And finally, I also wanted to thank committee services for especially at this time for managing to sort the technology and organise this meeting. Thanks to Kirsten, thanks to Audrey, thanks to Magda, and thanks to everybody else who have supported this effort. And it's testimony to you that apart from my own computer going down briefly, which you obviously couldn't control, thank you very much for everything that you've done. And thanks to members for their contributions and to officers for theirs. So I'll close this meeting now, and if you can please rejoin on a separate link after a couple of minutes, and we will continue with the private session. Thank you very much.